Welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. Here are the stories making the headlines at this hour. Tomorrow is the 22nd general elections here in South Korea. Last-minute election campaigning is in full swing nationwide. 2 out of 5 households in Korea are comprised of one person. Most are in their 60s. Experts believe this is due to a rapidly aging society and a decline in marriage rates. Hopes for a potential truce between Israel and Hamas are still deadlocked. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has set a date for an invasion of Rafah. Though the date has not been disclosed, Israel stays adamant that the offensive is critical to their victory in the war. There's just 1 day left before Koreans go to the polls to decide on a new 300-member National Assembly. The focus is on which party will secure the majority of the seats, as power in the National Assembly varies depending on the number of seats won. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young leads us off.
After about 2 weeks of competitive election campaigns, all that remains is the people's choice. The April election comes almost 2 years after conservative President Yoon's victory in the 2022 presidential election, where he narrowly defeated Democratic Party's candidate Lee Jae-myung by a margin of 0.73%, the smallest margin in South Korean history. For this year's election, the number of seats for elected lawmakers has increased to 254 from 253, with 1 seat taken from the proportional representation bloc, which dropped to 46 from 47, keeping the total number of lawmakers at the National Assembly at 300. Winning at least 150 of the 300 seats grants the party the power to pass budget bills and various laws. Any party that secures 3/5 or more of the National Assembly members, meaning 180 seats or more, will have strong legislative power, including the ability to fast-track bills. In the 2020 general election, the DP and its satellite party won 180 seats, resulting in a minority government with the Yoon administration taking office. Obtaining over 2/3, which is at least 200 National Assembly seats, further strengthens authority, allowing for constitutional amendments, dismissal of legislators, and even the ability to initiate presidential impeachment. As the Yoon administration enters its 3rd year in office, the DP is determined to maintain its dominance to act as a counterbalance to the ruling party and the Yoon administration. For the ruling People Power Party, this year's race is considered crucial because failing to secure a majority could potentially render President Yoon a lame duck for the remainder of his term. Eyes are now on how the April election will reshape the political landscape for the next 4 years, including the remainder of the Yoon administration's term. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Tomorrow, voters will be heading to polling stations in South Korea to select a new National Assembly member. Now, voters will be given a ballot paper that's even longer than the previous election in 2020, making it the longest ever ballot paper used in the country. Our Peunji breaks the election down into key numbers.
The general election is South Korea's biggest political event this year. You might be wondering how it works and what's different in 2024. Let's take a look at the election by the numbers. The voting age in South Korea is 18 after the country lowered the age limit from 19 in December 2019. Citizens born before April 11, 2006 are eligible to vote in this year's general election. This means more than 44 million Koreans will be heading to almost 15,000 polling stations across the country that'll be open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. There, voters will receive 2 ballot papers. One is to vote for a candidate running for their constituency, and the other is to vote for the party they support for proportional representation seats. This year, the ballot papers for proportional representation seats are the longest ever used in Korea. It's 51.7 centimeters long, as 38 parties have registered to battle over these seats. This is even longer than the last election in 2020, when the ballot paper was over 48 centimeters long, with 35 parties running. Before that, in 2016 and in 2012, the papers were about 30 centimeters. Just as in the 2020 election, the votes will have to be counted by hand, as electronic counters cannot read papers this long. Moving on to the candidates running for individual districts, the average competition rate stands at around 2.8 to 1 this year, the lowest in 39 years. In 2020, the rate was 4.4 to 1. Of the 699 candidates that are registered in 254 districts nationwide, 86% are men, leaving women as an unrepresentative minority. The average age of the candidates is 56.8, 2 years older than in 2020. Those in their 50s took up nearly half of the candidates, followed by those in their 60s and 40s. The youngest candidate is 28 years old, whereas the oldest is 85, born in 1938. By job, 65% of the candidates were professional politicians, 8% were attorneys, and 5% were professors or educators. Doctors and pharmacists accounted for about 1% of the total. The vote count for this year's election is expected to take about 2 more hours than usual and will likely have the final results at around 2 a.m. the next day.
The last round of campaigning efforts is in full swing, and our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo walks us through all the camp's nationwide efforts.
With the April 10th election day just around the corner, South Korea's capital region is heating up with competition. On Monday, just 2 days before final voting for the nation's 22nd general election, leaders across camps are focusing their campaign efforts in Seoul and the surrounding Gyeonggi-do province. The ruling People Power Party's interim leader Han Dong-un visited key cities in Gyeonggi-do province to support running candidates. While originally unannounced, Han later added to his itinerary an additional visit to the city of Incheon, which PPP's Won Hee-dong and the main opposition Democratic Party's leader Lee Jae-myung are racing against. Lee also started his daily campaign in the city before visiting other key districts in Seoul. He too supported other DP candidates in major battlegrounds, namely the Jongno-gu district in central Seoul, a traditional political hotspot. Other minor parties, including the Green Justice, Semire, New Reform, and Rebuilding Korea parties, also made their final push in the capital region. The focus in and near Seoul isn't quite a surprise considering how 122, or nearly half of all 254 electoral districts, are located in the capital region. While the voter turnout rate during last week's early voting marked a record high 31.28%, the figure for the capital Seoul was even higher at 32.63%, possibly suggesting even higher public interest in the region. The PPP attributed the strong turnout to people's judgment toward the main opposition party, while the DP viewed it as a sign of strong public sentiment against the government.
With the release of further opinion poll results restricted until voting finishes on Wednesday, candidates are on the final stretch of their election campaigns. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Recent data suggests that 2 out of 5 households in South Korea are single-person households. 1, because of the country's aging demographics, and 2, more and more people decide not to get married. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
According to data from the Ministry of Interior and Safety on Tuesday, the number of single-person households in South Korea stood at 10,021,413 as of March this year, marking the first time the figure has reached the 10 million mark. That's compared to 9,981,702 single-person households the previous month. Among the over 24 million households nationwide, single-person households make up 41.8%, or 2 out of 5. By age group, those in their 60s make up the highest proportion of people living in single-person households at over 1.86 million, followed by those in their 30s at over 1.68 million, and those in their 50s at over 1.64 million. People in their 70s and above accounted for over 1.98 million. By region, Gyeonggi-do province and Seoul had the highest proportion of single-person households. There were also more men living alone than women. The number of smaller-sized households, which consists of 1- and 2-person households, is increasing, while the number of larger households is decreasing. While the number of 2-person households also increased slightly in March, the number of 4-person households decreased from over 3.12 million households to around 3.11 million. The government believes that the proportion of single-person households is increasing due to the higher number of seniors living alone and the rise in unmarried people. It says it will continue to explore various policies centered on single-person households. In particular, the government is exploring policies related to rising food prices and stable housing as its top priority. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The number of female employees in South Korea reached a record level last year. Data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday shows that the number of female salary workers came to nearly 10 million in 2023, a more than 280,000 increase from the year before. Women also made up a record 45.7% of the nation's paid workforce last year. President Yoon Suk-yeol said he plans to directly supervise the nation's strategy on artificial intelligence as the country aims to become an AI semiconductor powerhouse. The top office said Yoon convened a meeting on Tuesday to review trends in the global semiconductor supply chain and to discuss the current status of the nation's plans to build a more than $450 billion semiconductor megacluster south of Seoul. He said construction to build the envisioned industrial complex in Yongin City would begin no later than 2026, with the government to take charge of supplying power and water needed by the cluster. Along with improvements to residential and transport infrastructure for the cluster, Yoon promised to review investment incentives and establish a national AI committee to coordinate various efforts amid the global rivalry to master the advanced technology. The U.S. Department of Commerce has unveiled a massive financial boost for the Taiwanese tech giant TSMC, a landmark decision aimed at reclaiming the U.S.'s leading role in the chip-making arena. Shin Se-byuk with more.
The U.S. Department of Commerce announced on Monday a significant subsidy of $6.6 billion to support the Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC. This move aligns with the 2022 CHIPS Act, a flagship policy of U.S. President Joe Biden, aimed at reshoring semiconductor supply chains to the U.S. after a decades-long shift to Asia. The latest announcement exceeds initial estimates by more than 30% from an expected $5 billion. In addition, the initiative includes up to $5 billion in low-interest government loans, bringing the total support to $11.6 billion. Monday's announcement came as TSMC outlined plans to increase its investment in the U.S. from $25 billion to $65 billion and to establish a third factory in Phoenix, Arizona by 2030. This expansion represents the largest foreign direct investment in U.S. history, highlighting TSMC's commitment to growing its U.S. operations. The Commerce Department expects TSMC's U.S. investment to create a significant economic impact by generating about 6,000 manufacturing jobs and 20,000 construction jobs. President Biden, in a statement on Monday, underscored the critical need for this initiative, noting Washington's vulnerability due to its inability to manufacture the most sophisticated semiconductors. He also emphasized that the CHIPS Act positions the U.S. to account for approximately 20% of global production of cutting-edge chips by 2030. Last month, the U.S. government unveiled a nearly $20 billion support package for the American chipmaker Intel. Attention now shifts to Samsung Electronics, with expectations over an announcement related to a subsidy for the South Korean chipmaker next week. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Contrary to reports from Cairo that an agreement was close to being reached for the ceasefire to the war in Gaza, Israel says an invasion of Rafah is critical to victory in the war, and a date has been set for this invasion. Yoon with the details.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Monday that a date has been set for an invasion of Rafah, where some 1.4 million displaced Palestinians are sheltering. No specific date was disclosed, but Netanyahu's remarks appear in direct opposition to reports that truce talks had seen progress. Earlier on Monday, a state-affiliated news channel in Cairo had reported that truce talks between Israel and Hamas, alongside Qatari and Egyptian mediators on Sunday, had all resulted in agreement on basic points. Al-Qahira News said a final agreement was expected to be reached within 48 hours. However, contrary to those reports, a Hamas official said no progress had actually been made on a ceasefire for the 6-month-old conflict. The Israeli foreign minister had described the Cairo talks on Sunday as the closest the two sides had come to a deal since a short-lived truce in November. But the Israeli prime minister said an invasion of Rafah was required for Israel's victory in this war.
Today, I received a detailed report on the talks in Cairo. We are constantly working to achieve our goals. First and foremost, the release of all our hostages and achieving a complete victory over Hamas. This victory requires entry into Rafah and the elimination of the terrorist battalions there. It will happen. There is a date.
Foreign governments and organizations have spoken out against Israel's plans to launch a Rafah offensive, with the southern city in a desperate condition and an invasion raising fears of further civilian casualties. Jin, Arirang News.
11 South Korean citizens have been evacuated from Haiti via helicopter due to the worsening security in the Caribbean nation. According to Seoul's foreign ministry on Monday, South Koreans were airlifted to the neighboring Dominican Republic, and officials did not add further details of the evacuation, citing the safety of other South Koreans there. Last month, the South Korean government evacuated 2 citizens from the country due to rising gang violence. The island nation has seen a rise in violence and poverty since the assassination of then-President Jovenel Moise in 2021. Currently, around 60 South Koreans are believed to be in Haiti. On the cultural front, we're now familiar with the buzz surrounding K-culture and its global impact, often referred to as Hallyu or the Korean Wave phenomenon. And now, one of the world's largest art museums is holding an exhibition entirely dedicated to the history and evolution of Hallyu. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
Hallyu, or the Korean Wave, is making a splash in America like never before. The Museum of Fine Arts Boston is hosting the U.S. debut of the exhibition Hallyu, the Korean Wave, back after its first run at London's Victoria and Albert Museum in 2022.
Hallyu really, at this moment, is a global phenomena. The influence it has on different regions around the world, on different generations of people, it's just really amazing. We have a very significant Korean art already, but it's mostly of the art before the 1900s. I think it's very important to show that, creativity, energy, and innovation.
MFA's Hallyu, the Korean Wave, showcases around 250 costumes, props, photos, videos, and artworks on Korean popular culture. The first section, From Rubble to Smartphones, delves into Korea's history over the past century through photos, videos, posters, and archival materials.
We think it's very important for people to understand Korea's recent history and how Hallyu really came out of there. And this is an incredible story about resilience and innovation.
Next, visitors explore the present K-culture with outfits worn by K-pop groups aespa and 80s. There are the iconic pink and green suits from the Netflix hit Squid Game and a recreation of the bathroom set from the Oscar-winning film Parasite. Wrapping up the experience is a dance challenge, inviting visitors to try K-pop's synchronized moves. But what distinguishes MFA's Hallyu, the Korean Wave, is its blend of past and present. Korean-American artist Julia Kwon's work showcasing patchwork textiles resembling bojagi, a traditional Korean object wrapping cloth, is an example.
My textile work that draws attention to the rise of anti-Asian hate during the COVID-19 pandemic is currently on display in Hallyu. I integrate patterns from contemporary socio-political events into the bojagi design to question people's preconceptions on authenticity and otherness. My work considers what it means to form an Asian feminine identity today within the context of globalism, cultural hybridity, intersectionality.
Hallyu, the Korean Wave, runs until July 28th at the MFA's Anne and Graham Gunn Gallery before heading to the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In North America, The first total solar eclipse in 7 years was observed on Monday, with the moon blocking out the sun for just under 4.5 minutes. People gathered all across the continent along the path of totality, which ran from Mexico's Pacific coast through Texas and 14 other U.S. states into parts of eastern Canada. Some 31 million people live along the path of totality, and federal officials said that around 5 million people travel to see the eclipse. The last total solar eclipse in North America was in 2017, which lasted about 2 minutes and 42 seconds. According to NASA, total eclipses can last from 10 seconds up to 7.5 minutes. The next total solar eclipse in the mainland US will be in 2044, while an earlier total eclipse in 2026 can be seen in Greenland, Iceland, Spain, Russia, and Portugal. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned China on Monday that Washington will not have Chinese imports decimating American industries. Wrapping up 4 days of meetings in Beijing, Yellen said in a news conference on Monday that U.S. President Joe Biden is determined to avoid a repeat of the China shock of the early 2000s, where a flood of cheaper Chinese imports destroyed some 2 million American manufacturing jobs. Yellen, since arriving in China the previous week, pressed the U.S. perspective that Chinese industries, fueled by government support, are producing excessively and straining global markets. Yellen also threatened to sanction Chinese banks facilitating transactions to the Russian military, to which the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said on Monday that their cooperation with Russia should not be restricted. Moscow has accused Ukraine of launching very dangerous drone attacks at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station over the past 48 hours. The nuclear power plant has been occupied and run by Russia since 2022. Russia says there were 3 drone attacks on Sunday and that Ukrainian forces attacked the plant again on Monday with a kamikaze drone, which was shot down over one of the reactors. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, condemned the drone strike on Monday, saying that no one can conceivably benefit and attacking a nuclear power plant is an absolute no-go. Ukraine has denied being behind the attacks. A British man successfully completed a monumental journey running the length of Western Africa on Sunday. 27-year-old Russ Cook began his extreme run last April from Cape Agulhas in South Africa and ran over 16,000 kilometers through 16 countries to finish in Ras Angela in Tunisia. Cook, who is the first person to run the length of the entire African continent, took 352 days to complete the run. Although Cook was faced with challenges, including a kidnapping and armed robbery, as well as hurdles with visas, he persevered in his mission to raise funds for charity. Cook received over $880,000 in donations. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We are having another warm, dry, but windy spring day, meaning the nation is on high alert against wildfires. Except on Jeju Island, the mainland is under the second highest level of forest fire warnings. A dry weather advisory remains in place in the capital, while the southeast coast is under a strong wind advisory today. Well, afternoon temperatures look to be 1 to 15 degrees lower than yesterday, and especially those in East Coast regions should notice a bigger drop in highs this afternoon, along with easterly winds. But western regions are having highs that are similar to yesterday, and it will be mainly sunny in central regions, but certain parts of the country will see more clouds with a chance of rain in the east of Jeollabuk-do province this afternoon. Promising weather is in store for the general election tomorrow. Then temperatures will soar to the mid-20s by the weekend in the capital. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you today. We'll bring you more updates at the same time on Thursday.